Hail, fellow travelers. Tim from Secret Fire Books here with another Sumerian September video. I want to give another big shout out to Michael Cavon for making this awesome reading event possible and giving us all here on BookTube an excuse to talk about Robert E. Howard, the greatest pulp fiction writer of all time. And not that I needed much of an excuse in the first place. I talk about Howard on this channel all the time, but still. In this video, I'm not going to be reviewing any short stories or novels or anything like that. I just wanted to show off my Robert E. Howard collection. So I have right here every single book in my library that has Robert E. Howard's name on it. And so just sit back and relax and enjoy the cover art. We're going to start with the Dell Robert E. Howard collections. These are big trade paperbacks that collect a ton of his stories in each volume. These books are still readily available. They're still in print, and you can find them all over the place, online and in stores. In fact, if you're lucky, you can't even find them at big chain bookstores like Barnes & Noble and Books A Million. This first book was the book that introduced me to Robert E. Howard, and by extension, his character Conan the Barbarian, back in my early 20s. This is The Coming of Conan the Cimmerian. This is a collection of the first 13 Conan stories, laid out in the order in which Robert E. Howard originally wrote them. And in my opinion, this right here is the best Conan collection available on the market. There are a few really good Conan stories that aren't in this book. But honestly, like I said, for my money, the first 13 stories that Howard wrote, those are where it's at. We have stories like The Tower of the Elephant, The Scarlet Citadel, The Queen of the Black Coast, The Frost Giant's Daughter, Rogues in the House. All the really big, important Conan stories are in this book. And it also contains a lot of extras. All of the Del Rey collections contain extras, things like letters that Robert E. Howard wrote to his friends and to his editors, maps, unfinished fragments, synopses for stories that he never got around to. It's a lot of really cool stuff. And so again, if you're going to own one Robert E. Howard book, it should be this one. It is absolutely fantastic. Next, we have The Bloody Crown of Conan. This book collects two short stories, The People of the Black Circle and A Witch Shall Be Born, as well as the novel The Hour of the Dragon, which is the only Conan novel that Robert E. Howard ever wrote. So yeah, that makes it pretty special. It's the slimmest volume in the Conan Del Rey series, but it's one that should not be looked over by any means. And then the last Conan in the Del Rey series is The Conquering Sword of Conan. This collects the last batch of Conan stories, and it includes the story Red Nails, which is often cited as one of Robert E. Howard's best short fiction stories. I'm not going to argue that. It's not one of my personal favorites, but yeah, it is a pretty darn good story. And once again, it's one that should not be overlooked. All three of these books are awesome. Honestly, if The Coming of Conan the Cimmerian contained the story Red Nails, it would blow all the other volumes out of the water. Moving on from the Conan series, we have Kull, Exile of Atlantis. This is the thinnest of the Del Rey collections, and it collects all of the stories about King Kull. Now, King Kull is not one of my favorite Robert E. Howard characters. He's an interesting character. I just don't find his stories nearly as exciting as some of Robert E. Howard's other material. There are some legitimately good stories in this collection. They're just not my favorite. Yeah, Kull is a much more introspective, philosophical kind of character. I feel like Robert E. Howard was definitely dealing with some of his inner demons when he wrote these stories. Yeah, that definitely shows. But it's a good insight into him as a writer, and it also gives you a look at the kind of sword and sorcery stories he was writing before Conan came along. Next, we have a character that I really enjoy. This is The Savage Tales of Solomon Kane. This is one of the thicker volumes in the series, and it contains every single scrap of information that Robert E. Howard ever wrote about Solomon Kane. Every short story, every poem, every fragment, every synopsis. Yeah, what more can you say? It's about a gun-toting Puritan who fights monsters and demons in the name of Jesus Christ. What more can you want? It's just excellent old-school pulp adventure. Next, we have Sword Woman and Other Historical Adventures. As the title suggests, it contains a bunch of his historical fiction short stories. Of particular note, it also contains the short story The Shadow of the Vulture, which is the first and only appearance of Howard's original version of the character Red Sonja. And this book also contains the two Dark Agnes stories. I've actually never read any of those stories. I have yet to dabble into this volume. I should. Dark Agnes sounds like a really interesting character. And the last Del Rey collection that I have is El Borak and Other Desert Adventures. I've been just getting into El Borak. I read the El Borak novel, Three-Bladed Doom, just this month, and I thought it was awesome. So yeah, I've been dabbling into this book a little bit. It's a fascinating character with some really cool historical adventure stories. But this book doesn't just contain the El Borak stories. It also contains some other historical adventures that take place in the Middle East and in countries outside your normal European historical setting. I also have this book. It doesn't fit in with the Del Reys, but it is another big trade paperback. This is a very interesting book. It's A Means to Freedom, Part 1. This is a collection of letters written by Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft. If you didn't know, Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft were pen pals. In fact, a lot of the Weird Tales writers wrote letters back and forth to each other, Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft among them. And so this book contains the letters that those two authors wrote to each other between the years 1930 and 1932. It is a dense book. I've tried reading a little bit of it, and there is just so much stuff in here. The letters that these two guys were writing back and forth are massive, massive letters. Yeah, it's not exactly the most exciting reading experience, but it is very insightful. Anytime I feel like learning about what was going on in the lives of Howard and Lovecraft around this time, I dip into this book and read up on it. So yeah, not the most exciting reading experience, but a very cool book to have. Okay, let's move on to mass market paperbacks. That's actually what I have the most of. This first one is an ace double. It is Conan the Conqueror, which was another name for The Hour of the Dragon, that novel I mentioned. This is its first edition paperback release. Yeah, it has this kind of cheesy cover where Conan is dressed as a Roman centurion for some reason. I don't know, it's dumb, but I like it. It's a charming cover. And then on the other side, we have The Sword of Rhiannon by Lee Brackett, which is a novel that I really need to get to at some point. Continuing with the Conan series, we have Conan. This is an ace reprint of the first Lancer book in the Conan series. Lancer reprinted all of the original Robert E. Howard stories, along with some pastiches by L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter in the 1960s. And so this is Ace's reprint of that first book. It has an awesome Frank Frazetta cover. Interestingly enough, Frank Frazetta was kind of infamous for never reading the books he was illustrating for. And so usually, even though his paintings were awesome, they weren't very, very accurate to the source material. This cover, on the other hand, is a pretty faithful rendition of the scene from the story Rogues in the House, where Conan fights this giant ape named Thak. And yeah, it's just a great cover. Absolutely love it. Then we have an actual Lancer edition. This is Conan the Usurper, also with Frank Frazetta cover art. Yep, that's a scene from the story The Scarlet Citadel, where Conan is trapped in a dungeon with a giant snake. Really cool stuff. Oh boy, and then here we have Conan the Avenger, also with a great Frazetta cover, and that's pretty much the only good thing about this book, because this is a pastiche novel written by L. Sprague de Camp and Bjorn Nyberg. I reviewed this book last year, and oh my goodness, I may have gone a little too far in certain places, but yeah, I hated that book. It was one of the worst things that I read in 2024. So yeah, after I read it, it actually fell apart, and I had to cobble it back together. I put it in this little bag to keep it all together, and I shall never open it and read it again. I shan't. It shall not happen. Then I have 3 books by Centaur Press, which is a little-known publisher. They put out 3 Solomon Kane collections. The first one is just called Solomon Kane. It has some awesome cover artwork by Jeff Jones. I really like that portrait of Solomon Kane. That is what I think of when I think of the character. Just very moody and gothic looking. Yeah, I love that picture. The second one is The Hand of Cain, also with Jeff Jones cover art. I've actually not read this one yet. I've read the other 2 Centaur Press Solomon Kane collections, just not this one. I picked it up recently from Pulp Fest. It's in pretty darn good condition. But the third and final one that I have is not in very good condition. This is The Moon of Skulls. And I don't know if you can tell, but yeah, it's hard to tell with the bag on it. But around here, there is this big round indentation. It looks like someone must have used this book as like a coaster for their beer bottle or something. Yeah, it makes me kind of sad that happened. But you know what? it's in a better home now. I would never do that to a Robert E. Howard book. Never. Next, I have a bunch of Zebra books. Zebra put out a lot of Robert E. Howard collections. They had two books called The Book of Robert E. Howard and The Second Book of Robert E. Howard, which were these bigger mass market paperback collections of just an eclectic mix of stories from throughout Howard's bibliography. I don't have the first one. I do have the second one, and I absolutely love that Jeff Jones cover. I'm a sucker for a winged helmet on a Viking warrior. Yeah, I know it's totally historically inaccurate, but I just love a good winged helmet. Look at that guy. He looks epic. Next, we have Black Volmea's Vengeance. This is a collection of pirate stories, historical adventure stories, rather, featuring pirates. I think Nick from the book Graveyard reviewed Black Volmea's Vengeance at some time, and I remember him saying that it was a pretty fun story, so I'll have to check this out at some point. Yeah, add this to the ever-expanding list of books that I need to read. Then we have A Gent from Bear Creek. This is a collection of his Breckenridge Elkins stories. Later in his career, Howard wrote a lot of humor stories, and one of his reoccurring characters was this big bumbling hillbilly named Breckenridge Elkins, who would get into all kinds of shenanigans and fight wild animals out in the wilderness. Yeah, it sounds like a very charming, interesting character. I've never read any of the stories, though. Then we have Tigers of the Sea. This is a collection of his Cormac MacArt stories. Cormac MacArt is another character I've never read. Apparently he is an Irishman who joins up with a fleet of Vikings and yeah, has adventures in early medieval Europe. That sounds right up my alley. I'll definitely have to check that out, too. Here we have Worms of the Earth. This is a collection of his Bran Mac Morn stories. Bran Mac Morn is a pretty cool character. I've only read the short story, Worms of the Earth. I haven't checked out any of the other stories, but yeah, it seems like a very interesting character. Got some awesome Roman chariot action going on. There's a wraparound cover. Yeah, that's very cool. This is that book that I read earlier this month. This is Three-Bladed Doom. This is an El Borak story. I know the cover makes it look like it's a sword and sorcery novel, but it is not. It's an El Borak novel. Just some good old-fashioned historical adventure. It takes place in early 1910s Afghanistan. Yeah, I mentioned in my review that this could be the best book I've read all year. I don't know for sure. We still have a few months to go. We'll find out. I also have The Iron Man, and much like Three-Bladed Doom, don't let that cover fool you. It's not fantasy. This is, in fact, a collection of boxing stories. I was interested enough to check this out a couple years ago, and I thought this was a really cool little collection. It's not anything incredible, but they're fun, action-packed boxing stories. I think if you like the Rocky movies or really any other sport movies, you'll definitely get a kick out of this. And the last Zebra book I have is one that I've just started dabbling in a little bit today. This is The Sowers of the Thunder, again with another Jeff Jones cover. It's technically a wraparound. Yep, there we go. Ooh, we got a panther. That's cool. This is a collection of historical stories that take place around the time of the Crusades, I believe. I've only read the first couple pages of one of the stories, that Shadow of the Vulture story that I mentioned earlier, because I want to get down to the origins of Red Sonja. I really like that character. It'd be cool to see where she came from in Howard's original mythos. Then we have, this is a Dell book. This is Bran Mac Morn. This is another collection of Bran Mac Morn stories, and it has a great Frank Frazetta cover. I love that painting so much. So savage, so moody. Yeah, it's a really, really good one. I have 3 books from Berkeley. Berkeley put out quite a few Robert E. Howard collections back in the day, and they all have cover art by Ken Kelly, whose work I really appreciate. This one is Almuric. I also read and reviewed this book this month. It's Robert E. Howard's one and only science fiction novel, if you can even call it that. There's no real science fiction elements in this story, aside from the fact that it takes place on a distant alien planet on the other end of the galaxy. It's mostly just a sword and sorcery story in outer space, but it's fun. It's a fun read. Then we have Swords of Sharazar. These are more historical stories that take place in the Middle East. Another great Ken Kelly cover. I should mention that all my editions of the Berkeley books have the fold-out Ken Kelly posters still intact. I considered several times taking the posters out and hanging them on my wall, but I'm afraid that I would destroy the books in the process. So for now, they're just going to remain in their original bindings. And then we have Skull Face. This is a collection of his horror stories, as well as some of his I guess you'd call them weird menace stories. Weird menace was a genre that was very popular back in the pulp era, where the villains and the threats that the heroes would face seemed to be supernatural, but were actually just regular people using some kind of trickery to get their way. But I hear that the story Skullface is a really good one, so again, I'm going to have to check that out sometime soon. We have more of his horror with Cthulhu, the Mythos and Kindred Horrors. This is a collection of his stories that are related to H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos. I read this book last year. It was okay. I'm not the biggest fan of Robert E. Howard's horror. I don't think it holds a candle to H.P. Lovecraft's personally, but there are some good stories in this collection. It has Worms of the Earth. That's where I read Worms of the Earth for the first time. It also has The Lair of the White Worm, which is a really cool historic fantasy story. And it has the story Pigeons from Hell, which in my opinion is the best horror story Robert E. Howard ever wrote. At least the best one that I've read so far. This is The She-Devil. This is an Ace publication. The She-Devil. It is a series of historical pirate-related stories that were originally published in Spicy Adventures magazine. And basically what that means is if something is a spicy adventure, it's basically softcore erotica with a historical setting. At the time, these were pretty sensational, I'm sure. But by today's standards, they're pretty tame. Not that I would know. I've never actually read this book, of course. Liar! And the last paperback that I have is actually a double. This is another copy of Swords of Charizard. This is an Orbit book from the UK. I accidentally bought a double at Pulp Fest. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I've considered sending it to a friend of mine. I might just keep it around just because it's another cool-looking cover to have in the collection. I don't know. Yeah, it is what it is. And to cap this video off, I have some hardcovers. There's only 2 of them, to be fair, but they are very special, to me at least. The first one is actually one that I picked up from Pulp Fest. It is a collection of his Western stories. This is The Vultures. Look at that cover. I love that dude. He is a mean-looking gunfighter right there. So gritty. I love it. And then on the back, we have that very famous picture of Howard in his suit and tie, and a little author bio down there. This book is illustrated. Who did the illustrations in this? Stephen E. Fabian. There's the front piece right there. Yeah, I've been having a hard time getting into the Western genre. I want to be able to enjoy Western fiction. It's just that all the authors that I've read so far haven't really done it for me. So I figure if anyone's going to get me into Westerns, it'll be Robert E. Howard, one of my favorite writers of all time. We have some nice glossy black and white plate illustrations here. Got a shootout going on in the saloon. That's what I'm talking about. And the last book I have to talk about is The People of the Black Circle. This is one of 3 volumes edited by Carl Edward Wagner. Now, for context, in the 60s and early 70s, the only way you could read Robert E. Howard's Conan stories was through the Lancer paperback editions, and as I said, those were heavily edited by L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter. Thankfully, in the late 70s, Carl Edward Wagner, God rest his soul, compiled 3 books from the original Robert E. Howard typescripts. He totally re-edited the stories and put them all together in a 3-volume set. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to do that for all the short stories. He was able to put out 2 short story collections and a re-edited version of The Hour of the Dragon. So this is a short story collection that contains, what stories does this have? It has The People of the Black Circle, obviously. It also has, where's the table of contents? It also has The Devil in Iron, A Witch Shall Be Born, and Jewels of Gwalar. Not my favorite Conan stories, but some good ones. Most of Robert E. Howard's Conan stories were entertaining at the very least. And we have some of the illustrations from the original Weird Tales magazines where these short stories first appeared. Really cool stuff. And to top it all off, for me at least, they have excellent, all 3 of these books have excellent cover art by Ken Kelly. And the cover for The People of the Black Circle is my favorite. Not only that, it might be my favorite bit of Conan-related art. That might sound like, heresy to some people, especially fans of Frank Frazetta. But his nephew, Ken Kelly, had some real chops. He painted some really great Conan paintings. And this one in particular is really special to me. I feel like it encapsulates everything that works about the sword and sorcery genre. You got Conan about to hack down that sorcerer, getting ready to cast a spell on him. It just sums up the core themes of sword and sorcery to me. You know, mind against muscle, sorcery against steel, the metaphysical against the physical. Yeah, it's everything that Robert E. Howard stood for in his fiction, boiled down to one image. I really, really love it. All right, so that's it. Those are all of the books I have in my Robert E. Howard collection. I'm sure the collection will expand in the future because, as I said, he is one of my favorite authors, and I'm always keeping an eye out for his books. But let me know in the comments, guys, how many of these books do you have? Which ones are your favorite? And until next time, as always, farewell and keep reading.